Welcome to the Deep Dive. We're here to unpack the key ideas from sources you should know about, basically giving you a shortcut to getting up to speed.
That's the plan.
And today, we're getting into something that's, well, changing things incredibly fast, sometimes without us even noticing, generative AI. So picture this. It's November 2023. There's this programmer, Charlie Holtz. He shares a video online.
Right, I remember seeing something about this.
Yeah, so he's used these pretty powerful tools from OpenAI and 11 Labs, you know, the AI voice company.
Yeah, 11 Labs, they're very good.
Very good. And he's made a perfect clone of Sir David Attenborough's voice.
Oh, okay.
And he's using it to narrate his own life, like a nature documentary, but about him. Your first reaction is probably, that sounds amazing. Kind of cool, tempting even.
Oh, absolutely. That initial wow factor is definitely there. I mean, the technical skill involved with what generative AI can do now, it's genuinely astonishing. But yeah, that instant excitement, it slams right into a pretty big ethical wall, doesn't it?
Exactly. Because Sir David Attenborough himself, well, he wasn't thrilled. He later came out pretty strongly against it.
He voiced serious concerns, yeah. His voice was used totally without his permission. And he talked about, the worry of being misrepresented.
Making him say things he doesn't believe, or even undermining the causes he's spent his life championing.
Precisely. It highlights that core tension.
And that's really what we want to unpack in this deep dive today. It's about getting underneath these massive, super fast changes AI is bringing.
Uh-huh.
We'll look at the everyday stuff, like that voice clone, which seems kind of fun at first.
Right.
But also dig into the much deeper, trickier ethical questions. Things about identity, truth, our basic social rules.
We're trying to get past just the headlines here, right? To understand the nuances, so what does this actually mean for you part?
Exactly. What does it mean for you listening right now?
And just so you know where we're coming from, we've been digging into some really good material. There's a piece from Tech Perspectives that really gets into deepfakes and the whole ethics of generative AI.
Yeah, that one's helpful for framing the consent and representation issues.
Definitely. And we're also drawing from a big analysis by Built-in, which maps out how AI is, well, changing just about everything.
So pulling from different places to try and give you the full picture.
That's the idea.
Okay, so let's unpack this Attenborough thing a bit more. It really shines a light on how easy and, frankly, how good generative AI has become at making what people call deepfakes.
Right. And generative AI, just to be clear, is this type of AI that can create totally new stuff, audio, like in this case, but also text, images, video, things that seem real.
Yeah, it's way beyond just fiddling with Photoshop now. You can spin up incredibly believable audio or text in, like, seconds.
And the Tech Perspectives article hammers this point home. This ability raises massive ethical flags, especially around, how someone's identity is used and this fundamental idea of consent.
Think about it. A programmer makes Attenborough narrate his breakfast. Some people, maybe even students in an ethics and AI class looking at this case, might initially think, well, what's the harm?
Especially if it's not for profit, maybe not meant maliciously.
Right, he's a public figure anyway.
But what's so interesting is Attenborough's own reaction. It just cuts through those initial thoughts. He explicitly called the specific use of the greatest concern. Why? Because of that fear of being deceived or misrepresented. And that brings up two really key ethical ideas that maybe we don't always think about beyond just direct harm or getting explicit permission. It's about respectful representation and the potential for deception.
So it's not just, did this hurt someone directly?
Exactly. It's also about, does this generated thing reflect how the person wants to be seen? And could it fool people about what they actually said or did?
That idea that you should have control over your own image, your own voice, your identity, that seems really central, even if the use doesn't seem overtly nasty.
Absolutely. And look, this isn't just a problem for famous people like Attenborough, is it?
No way. The sources we looked at mentioned some truly horrifying examples where this tech has been weaponized.
Like those fake nude images of high school girls in New Jersey.
Yeah, exactly. Or that principal in Maryland whose voice was faked by an employee to make him sound racist.
Awful.
And as this stuff gets cheaper, faster, more convincing, we're just going to see more and more fake content flooding everything.
It really makes you wonder if the current laws are already struggling to catch up.
Which they are.
Then what new social norms, what sort of collective understanding do we need to build around what's okay and what's not okay with AI-generated content about real people?
And how do you even start building those norms when the tech is changing practically overnight.
It's a huge challenge. Some places like California have specific laws targeting, say, sexual or political deepfakes. But a lot of uses, like the Attenborough example, or even if you, I don't know, made a funny voice clone of your friend narrating your cat, they don't easily fit into existing laws like harassment or defamation.
So you need more than just the law.
Exactly. That's why thinking ethically is so critical. And the companies building these incredibly powerful tools, they have a huge responsibility here.
They're often called dual-use technologies, right? Good uses and bad uses.
That's the term. And the Tech Perspectives article argues these companies have ethical and probably legal obligations to try and minimize the harm.
What does that look like in practice?
Well, things like maybe embedding invisible watermarks in AI content or having really strong checks on the data they use. Though, we saw with those fake AI Joe Biden robocalls using 11 Labs.
That was concerning.
It proves nothing's foolproof, but companies still have to decide, what level of potential abuse is acceptable and how they're going to enforce that.
Okay, so the Attenborough case really forces us to grapple with identity and consent in the age of AI. But AI's impact, it's obviously much broader than just voice cloning.
Oh, much broader. It's quietly but radically changing almost every single industry you can think of.
The built-in source had some striking numbers, like over 40% of enterprise businesses had already put AI into their operations by 2023.
And another 40% were actively thinking about it.
Yeah.
It's not just the big tech companies anymore.
Take healthcare, for example.
Yep.
AI isn't just making disease identification faster.
No, it's actually uncovering completely new patterns in diseases, things human doctors hadn't spotted before.
Which fundamentally changes how we understand certain conditions,
Yeah.
potentially leading to much earlier, more targeted treatments.
That's huge. And you see similar ripples everywhere.
Yeah.
Finance, AI boosting fraud detection, education, personalized learning paths, transportation, obviously. Self-driving cars are a big one.
Yeah.
But what's really mind-bending is the sheer speed this is happening at. The CEO of Anthropic, Dario Amodei, he talked about the compressed 21st century.
Right. What was that idea again?
His hypothesis is basically that we could see maybe 50 to 100 years worth of normal innovation crammed into just 5 or 10 years by massively boosting the sort of cognitive power, the brain power, applied to research using AI.
Wow. Just think about how fast the world changes if innovation accelerates like that.
It's almost hard to wrap your head around.
But, okay, with all this incredible speed and integration comes, well, the challenges. And not just deepfakes.
Definitely not. Job disruption is a big one people talk about.
Yeah, employees themselves think nearly a third of their tasks could potentially be done by AI already.
No, this doesn't hit everyone equally, right? Some groups are more exposed to AI in their jobs, face a bigger skills gap.
So upskilling, rethinking work itself, that's going to be absolutely critical.
Another massive area, data privacy. These AI models, especially the big language ones we've been talking about, they need enormous amounts of data to learn.
They're hungry for data.
Insatiable. And that's led to things like the FTC investigating OpenAI's data practices. The Biden administration even put out an AI Bill of Rights listing data privacy right at the core.
So the question becomes, how careful are companies being with our personal data? And what about all the company information businesses are feeding into these tools?
And this connects directly to regulation and intellectual property fights, too. We're seeing more and more lawsuits, writers, the New York Times suing companies like OpenAI over using copyrighted stuff for training.
Right. And then there are even broader worries. Infrastructure, fairness.
Yeah, the energy use is a big one. Training these huge AI models takes a ton of electricity.
Which could seriously impact carbon emissions, kind of running against sustainability goals.
Potentially, yeah. And then there's bias. If you train AI on biased historical data,
It learns the biases.
it learns them and it can even amplify them, leading to unfair outcomes, like facial recognition that works poorly for certain groups.
And of course, the really scary stuff, AI in autonomous weapons. That raises incredibly difficult questions about accountability, but distinguishing targets.
It's a really complex picture. Some people talk about the singularity, this future point where AI zooms past human intelligence.
The sci-fi scenario.
Kind of. But maybe the more immediate worry for a lot of us is just the lack of transparency, the black box problem.
We don't always know how these complex AIs reach their decisions.
Exactly, which makes it super hard to understand mistakes, fix them, or even predict weird behavior if we don't grasp the underlying logic and data. So yeah, we're surfing this incredible wave of
And we're
innovation.
trying not to drown in all the ethical and practical problems it's creating.
Pretty much sums it up.
So, okay, let's try to pull this together. What does all this mean for you listening? We've seen AI has this unbelievable power for innovation, for efficiency, changing industries, maybe even speeding up discovery itself.
There's always a but.
Yeah, but it's tied up with these really knotty ethical problems.
Yeah.
Deepfakes, consent, what even counts as truth anymore online?
And it forces us to think this isn't just about the code or the algorithms. It's about how we as people, as a society, actually want to live and deal with each other now that AI is becoming, well, embedded in everything. It really does push us to think about our own part in this. As people using these tools, as citizens, what kind of rules, what social agreements do we need now?
How do we get the benefits of innovation?
While still protecting people and maintaining some level of trust. It's a huge balancing act.
It really is. Okay, so on that note, let's leave you with a final thought to chew on, something that builds on this but we didn't explicitly get into.
Okay.
Given AI's power to compress, maybe decades of innovation into just a handful of years, what fundamental human quality, something beyond just our jobs or our data, do you think will become our most valuable, maybe our most fiercely protected asset in this coming compressed 21st century?